Hello, everyone that is watching the class. We are now streaming live on Facebook. Let me just go to Facebook and make sure that it's indeed streaming live, which will be fantastic. And we're ready for an amazing class. So we are live, yes. I must tell you that we are going to end tonight's class. We are going to end tonight's class with a bomb story. One of those stories that are just like dynamite, that are just like awesome stories that just blow your socks off. So I'm looking forward to that. Let us begin first. Chaim. Tonight's class, several important announcements. Tonight's class is, as I wrote on Facebook earlier today, is in memory. Oh, second. I have the names written down. Is in memory of two people that passed away. One passed away 2 days ago. One passed away over Pesach. Both sadly were buried without Kaddish being said at their funerals. So today I did the funeral of Gershon Eliezer ben Shlomo, a teacher, a school teacher, who to be a teacher automatically means he's an amazing person, tremendous gifts and talents to be able to inspire and to help so many others. He passed away. He was buried today, unfortunately, in Minyan. Today we'll also dedicate the class in the merit of Daniel ben Menachem Yitzchak, a young man who passed away under very sad circumstances, and it took some time for his family to find him, and he was buried also without his family there. And on my own, I decided I wanted to dedicate the class in their memory. I do want to also say that tonight's class and all of our adult classes are in the memory and in the schus, in the merit of the neshama of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, Irving Simuknov, who his son dedicated these classes in his memory. And I finally want to say that if you want to dedicate a class, any class, in honor of a yard site, in honor of a birthday, in honor of any special occasion, you can go onto our website, lifelongjewishlearning.com, and you can make a donation to dedicate a class, to sponsor a class. This I did just, it was bothering me knowing about these people that had not had Kaddish being said for them, and therefore this came on my own. But in the future, if anyone wants to dedicate any classes, it will be a big mitzvah. Because we need the support. There's a lot of time and effort and resources that go into preparing each and every class. And the class that I teach for an hour takes me 2-3 hours minimum to prepare. And I love it. I love preparing, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. And putting together all of this is work. Even sending out emails, etc. More importantly, is that the merit of all the Torah we're going to learn tonight is in the merit of whoever the class is in the merit. So tonight's class in the merit is Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, in the merit of Daniel ben Menachem Yitzchak, in the merit of Gershon Eliezer ben Shlomo, who did not have Kaddish said. This learning about the history and the importance and the messages for us from Kaddish will, God willing, be able to find their soul of elevation through our learning tonight. Okay, so let us begin with a story. Let us begin with a story. The question that we will be addressing tonight is, why do we say Kaddish? And perhaps a question that more people have is, why does Kaddish need to be said only with a minyan? Why can you not say Kaddish without a minyan? What's wrong if a person's at home and they want to say Kaddish at home? So we will address that tonight. But first, let me begin with a story, right? If I don't have a good joke to say, so a story. Hello, all those who are watching. Hello, Eric. Thank you. Everything is fine. Yes, hello, Martian, Terry, and Jonathan, etc. This story is a classic story. It's written in the Zohar. It's written in the Medrash. It's written in Tanat Be'Elio. It's printed in many, many places. It's a story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, the great famous sage Rabbi Akiva, was once traveling. He was once going somewhere. According to the Zohar, he was in a dream. Others said he saw him in real life. And he sees a man naked with a dark, burnt skin, he looks like full of dust, carrying an extremely heavy load of firewood on his head, and he's running at a very rapid pace. And Rabbi Akiva commands the man to stop. And Rabbi Akiva says to him, why are you running with such a heavy load? Where are you running? If you're a slave, tell me who your master is, and I will be glad to redeem you from such a terrible master. If you are poor and you must work to such an inhuman effort, let me give you money so that you'll have food, that you won't have to work so hard. The man begs Rabbi Akiva, says, Rabbi Akiva, please just let me go, because my taskmasters will see that I'm not working and become angry with me. So again, he asks, Rabbi Akiva asks the man, tell me, who are your taskmasters? Who are you so afraid of who are you so afraid of that you are afraid to stop to talk for a minute? The man says, I am a dead person. Every day I am sent back to this world to collect firewood. And I build a giant fire, and every night I am put into the fire and I am burnt all night. He was such a terrible punishment. Tell me, what did you do? What was your occupation in this world to deserve such a punishment? So the man said to Rabbi Akiva, I was a tax collector, which was a very corrupt kind of occupation back in the times of the Roman government. I took bribes from the rich, and I had innocent poor people put to death in order to sustain my illegal financial activities as a tax collector. And now I'm being punished for my crimes. Rabbi Akiva says to him, is there nothing that you heard in heaven that can be done to earn you merit, to allow your soul to be given reprieve from the terrible, terrible suffering? And again, he says, please let me go. I'm reading the text over here in front of me. He says, please let me go. My taskmasters will be angry. Rabbi Akiva insists, telling me there must be some way that your soul can be freed from this terrible cycle of punishment. And so he says, the only way that I would be able to be freed from this terrible punishment is if my child would stand up in public and cause the name of God to be sanctified in public through my prayers. Only then would I be released from punishment. But I was a wicked man. I left behind a wife that was pregnant, that I'm sure no one has taught any Torah to, and I have no one in the world that will teach my child Torah. When Rabbi Akiva heard this, Rabbi Akiva felt terrible. Rabbi Akiva said to him, let me go and find your son. Tell me what he's leave. I personally take responsibility to make sure that your son learns Torah. So he said, my name, this tax collector tells Rabbi Akiva, my name is Akiva. My wife's name was Shoshniba, and I came from a town called Lutkia. Rabbi Akiva right away goes to the travels to the town Lutkia, and when he asks about this person, they tell him, may his bones be ground to dust in hell. When he asks about his wife, there's similar things. Say she's a terrible woman, she should burn in hell. So he says, where is this man? They finally find him. He says, where is this man's child? So they say he's a wicked kid. He's been uncircumcised. He never even had a bris, and no one will circumcise him. Rabbi Akiva himself went to circumcise this young man, and he refused to learn. And Rabbi Akiva fasted until eventually he was able to teach this child how to read Hebrew, and then he taught him how to pray. He taught him the Shema, and he brought him to the synagogue. And when he stood up and he said the Kaddish for his father, he went back home. And that night, the story ends, as it's printed in the Zohar, etc., that the man came to Rabbi Akiva in a dream. And he said, this is the words in Hebrew, he said to him, may be God's will, that just like just like you calmed my das, you calmed my spirit to allow me to stop all the suffering and punishment, so too tanuach daitcha began Eden, may your spirit also be calmed in Gan Eden as a reward for having spared me this terrible suffering. Amazing story. Rabbi Akiva was able to alleviate the terrible suffering of this person simply because he had found a way to have his son say Kaddish for him, and through saying Kaddish for his son, he removed all the suffering of his father in up in heaven. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to discuss tonight is the text of the mourner's Kaddish. We're going to talk about why we say the Kaddish, what is in the Kaddish, the history of the Kaddish, and I am sure automatically, well, we'll explain why it is so important that Kaddish can only be said as part of a minyan, etc. So what is the Kaddish? What is the Kaddish? If you've ever read the Kaddish inside, I'm sure you are familiar with the words of the Kaddish, and you know that the Kaddish actually does not read like a mourner's prayer. It does not read like a mourner's prayer. I'm trying to find a translation. I wanted to do this before, and then we forgot to set this up before. But let me just find it in English so we can put it up on the screen. You are all familiar with the meaning of the Kaddish, as I'm sure you are. Here we go. Let's open this up. So if you let's open up the text of the Kaddish. Let's share my screen for a second, and you're going to see that the Kaddish is actually not what you would think would be the normal prayer for a person that were in mourning. The words are in Hebrew, Yiskada v'Yiskadash Shmei Rabba, which in English means as follows: exalted and hallowed. Make it bigger, be easier for those that are a little bit older to read. Exalted and hallowed be God's great name in the world which God created according to plan. May God's majesty be revealed in the days of our lifetime and the life of all of Israel speedily, imminently, to which we say, Amen. And we say, Yehei, blessed, praised, honored, exalted, glorified, adored, and lauded be the name of the Holy and Blessed One, beyond all the earthly world, beyond all the earthly words and songs of blessing, praise, and comfort. This so far does not look like a prayer said in mourning. Does not look like a prayer said in mourning. And I don't have the rest here in front of me, but it's okay. You're all familiar, I'm sure, with the Kaddish. If you're not, I highly recommend that you go and you read it, and you will discover that this prayer does not seem like what you would typically say at the end of a funeral. So it's a prayer that begins with praising God's name. The core of the prayer is the line that we all respond. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mivarach, which means may God's great name be exalted and be glorified and be magnified and be lauded. That's what it means. And then the end of the Kaddish is the prayer Oseh Shalom B'Romav, which means that may God bring peace in his creatures. So too, just like this peace in the exalted creatures in the heavenly heights, so too, Yas Shalom Aleinu, may God make peace upon us. V'al Kol Yisrael, upon all of Israel, the Imiru, Amen. Okay, so how does this prayer, praising God's name, where all of us respond, Amen, yes, it is true, his name should be glorified, and ending with a prayer for peace on the world, how is that a fitting prayer for the loss of a beloved father, a beloved brother, a beloved child, people that have been lost in the last few weeks? So let's go back to the beginning. Let's try to understand the history. Where does Kaddish come from? Let's understand the history of Kaddish, its origins, which are fascinating. And as we see the evolution of Kaddish, we'll understand its message for us. And that in turn will also explain the reason for the minyan, etc. Okay. The beginning of the Kaddish prayer begins at the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the first temple. It began the destruction of the first temple, which happened 1,000 years before the Talmud. You're going back like 2,500 years ago to the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. The Jewish people are exiled in Babylonia. The language of Babylonia is Aramaic. Hence, the Talmud, which was written after the Kaddish, is also written in Aramaic. And it's very much a prayer of trust and declaring, was off my papers there, a prayer of declaring the greatness of God's name. Classification. To go out of the repository. It's a prayer declaring the greatness of God's name, which was said by the people that were mourning the destruction of the first base Hamikdash. Now, the temple of the first destruction. The core of this prayer, as I said, is the Yehei Shmei Rabbah, which is the declaration of God's greatness, that His name should be magnified and glorified. I want to mention that someone said to me, I'll say that I have written down for later. I see here a comment about the Zohar being written in Aramaic. And yes, that's true. And in a minute, I'll talk about, I'll say it now already. The reason, I'll say in a minute about it being written. The Zohar is written in Aramaic. One of the reasons why Kaddish is written in Aramaic is because in Kabbalah it explains that any prayer that's said in Aramaic or in a foreign tongue actually is able to subjugate more external forces of holiness than those that would exist within the normal realm of Kedusha, of holiness, that exists within Lashon Kodesh, the holy tongue. So when you have a prayer, a holy prayer, like for example, when we open up the ark to take out the Torahs, the prayer that we say when we open up the ark to take out the Torah scrolls, after we sing Vayehi B'nso Haron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Hashem, after we sing that song, the next paragraph is written in Aramaic. And the reason is because there's an extra holiness that's found in a prayer not written in Hebrew, but written in Aramaic, that it's able, that the holiness is able to permeate and to transform what's called the forces of impurity, or in Kabbalistic jargon, the chitzonim, the external forces of the world that are not naturally or obviously nullified to holiness, and we elevate them as well. However, that's more of a spiritual reason why it's in Aramaic. On a simple reason, the reason why the Kaddish in Aramaic is because, as I said, when was the Kaddish originally written? In the times when the Jews were living in exile, in the diaspora, and because many of the Jews were not fluent, like today in America, that many of the Jews were not fluent in the proper Hebrew, which is actually why the whole prayer book had to be written, because Jews weren't fluent in how to pray properly. They wanted to ensure that the people that were in the synagogue would understand the words of the Kaddish. And if the Kaddish would be in traditional Hebrew language, the masses, the uneducated masses living in exile after the destruction of the first temple, would not be able to understand what it was that was being said in the Kaddish prayer. And therefore, in order to help them, that everyone should understand the Kaddish was deliberately left in Aramaic, which would be the equivalent of a prayer being said in English today. So if we were to make a prayer that was so important to the service, that we wanted to make sure that every single person that came inside the sanctuary understood the prayer, we would make the prayer in English. Hence, the Kaddish is in Aramaic, and it shows you the timelessness of the prayer, that it remained in its Aramaic. Well, let's go through the history. There's actually 4 or 5 different forms of the Kaddish. There's the Chatzi Kaddish, the half Kaddish, which is said as a transition point in different minor parts of the prayer. There is the complete Kaddish, which is said at the end of the prayer. So there's an extra line in there called Tiskabel Tziloson, which is basically a line that says, may our Tziloson, our prayers in Aramaic, may our prayers be received and accepted up in high, and may God listen and accept and grant us that which we prayed for. So when they established the prayers, they had the minor transition between, let's say, the verses of praise and the blessings of the Shema with a half Kaddish, and once every service at the end of the Amidah, the end of the service, so the primary ending of the service, the complete Kaddish, which had in it the line Tiskabel, asking our prayers be accepted, and on the completion, we would actually step back and conclude the Kaddish with the prayer for peace. Oseh Shalom Mimromah, may God make peace on high, make peace upon us and upon all of Israel. The next form of Kaddish was a Kaddish called the Rabbi's Kaddish, Kaddish de Rabbanan. Now, this Kaddish de Rabbanan was an epilogue to the rabbinic study of Mishnah. So when the rabbis would be sitting and studying, at the end of their studies, they would say a special prayer on behalf and for all of those scholars that had been sitting and studying, and they would add to it the long paragraph that would say Al Yisrael, the Al Rabbanan, which is basically a prayer for the Jews, for the rabbis, for Talmidei Hon, for the students of the rabbis, the Al Talmidei Hon, on the students of their students, and all those who come to the yeshiva to study and pray, they should be blessed with blessing and sustenance and everything they need, etc., etc. So this prayer, the highlight, or so to say, the most special time when the Kaddish was said, was actually not in the context of a mourner, but was in the context of completion of Torah study, where the entire Kaddish was said, including a special paragraph, the Al Yisrael, the long, lengthy paragraph that was used for the conclusion of study. And I could go on my computer and find it and show you a PDF of it, but I am assuming that everyone watching, not almost everyone watching tonight, is familiar. You've been to show before, and you're familiar with the regular Kaddish, the Chazan says, and then the long the Kaddish de Rabbanan, that says Al Yisrael, Al Rabbanan, that long paragraph said after we study, like En Kelokenu, which is a studying. I don't listen in the room in front of me, but I'm sure that if you've been to the synagogue, you'll see where it says Rabbi's Kaddish, etc. Now, let me tell you the history. This is fascinating. At the end of Shiva, at the end of a mourning period, for a rabbi, for a scholar, they would study. There's a custom that we study in the home of a mourner. We study Mishnayos. We study Mishnah, because Mishnah is the same letters as Neshama. So we study the Mishnahs that elevate the soul of the Neshama of the person that passed away. And at the conclusion of these studies, on behalf of the person's soul, the rabbis that were gathered in this mourner's home in study and in learning and merit of the soul would conclude with the rabbi's Kaddish, the complete Kaddish, including the paragraph for the rabbis. However, it became a custom that all Jews should say it, even those who were not scholars, and even those who were not able to study, and especially mourners. And when I say mourners, originally began with mourners who were young children, who were minors, who were too young to study. They were definitely too young to lead a prayer service, but they were the ones who, and they weren't able to study a Mishnah or to teach, to learn something in memory of their parents, their father, mother, whoever it was that had passed away. So these mourners that were orphans, that were young children, that's what the word yassel means. When we say an orphan, the Hebrew word for mourners, Kaddish, is a Kaddish yassel, the Kaddish of the orphan, meaning the young boy or the young child that passed through, that lost a parent. So since they couldn't learn and the merit of the soul, instead it was instituted that they should say the Kaddish as if they had studied for their parents' soul. And then in order not to differentiate which person they said pray, they did study for, and who didn't have someone studying for them, etc., it became universal that in every Shiva home, in every home of mourning where people have gathered to commemorate someone that has passed away, in order not to differentiate to those that are the scholars and those are not the scholars, we don't want to embarrass, especially at a time of mourning. You don't want to embarrass the person to say, "Oh, he wasn't the scholar; he doesn't deserve to have the prayers being said for him." So therefore, they instituted everyone should say Kaddish in the Shiva home of the mourner. Now, this is also connected to saying it in the synagogue, where there was a state of national mourning for the destruction of the temple. And also the opening words of the Kaddish, I didn't know this until today, that the opening words of the Kaddish are connected to the opening verse from Yecheskel that also begins, "I have exalted and I have sanctified my name. I have made it known in the eyes of all the nations, and they should know that I am the Lord," which is very similar to the structure of the Kaddish. So basically, the point of the Kaddish began really as a prayer in Babylonia, partly in commemoration and in mourning of the loss of the temple, and Also, it was said in the home of a shiva for people that were studying for the rabbis. And then it became universal that it wouldn't only be for those that had studied and now wanted to end their studies with a prayer, but even those that had not studied could still say the prayer without the studying before. Hence, the mourners Kaddish, the mourners that couldn't study, that said the Kaddish without that long paragraph, Al Yisrael. And instead, they put in a much, much shorter paragraph, which is the line, Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, and may there be tremendous peace upon heaven, upon all of us, etc. That is the history of the Kaddish. I hope that I was clear. If there's any questions, if you're on Zoom, if you're on our lifelongjewishlearning.com, or if you're on Facebook, please make a comment if you're not sure of something I said. I'll be glad to explain it. I hope it's clear. The different Kaddishes, like I should have really had it on the screen to show you the different ones, but I didn't. Maybe I'll show you right now very, very quickly if I can find it in 5 seconds online. And if not, I will just forget about it. I'm seeing transliterated here. We'll move on. I don't think a good one, but some images. That's why. But you all understand the idea, I hope, of what we are saying. Here's a text of the mourners Kaddish. Oh, it's a video. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna leave it. So that's the history. Now, so why do we need to go to something? I want to say one more thing before I go there. As I said already, the core, the most important part of the Kaddish is actually not even the words of the Kaddish, it's the chorus, which is Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach, which is basically where we say, may God's name be glorified and be exalted and be lauded. And that's not said, it was said by the leader of the Kaddish, but it's actually said by the entire congregation. And then we also say after each line, Amen. So I got a comment, someone went to our website today, lifelongjewishlearning.com. And you can go online, you can put in a comment of what you'd like the class to be about and any topics. I've gotten a few comments, a few suggestions. I would like to get more suggestions. So if you want to go onto lifelongjewishlearning.com, I'll show you at the end of the class how to do it. It'd be a great idea. But so he said to me that he was told in synagogue, the reason why we say Amen is because by you saying Amen, then in the future, one day when you are no longer alive, someone will say Amen for you. A good thought, but it's a little bit perhaps more of a feel-good thought than a technically true thought. The word Amen means true. In fact, the word Amen comes from the word Uman, which means a professional, a craftsman. When someone is very, very talented at something, they're really good at it, it's called an Uman. So Amen means, yes, it's true, yes, I agree. So when you say, Yiskada, Shmei Rabba, which means that God's name be glorified and exalted, you respond, the congregation, the rest of us assembled in the room, say Amen, which means, yes, it is true. Yes, we agree. Amen. And therefore, what's happening by the Kaddish is not just that the person who's in mourning is saying a prayer of praise to God, but he's causing that everyone assembled in the room is also saying praise. And here's the real beauty of this. This person saying the praise and causing everyone else to respond is causing that the name of heaven is being sanctified. In Hebrew, we call it a Kiddush Shem Shemayim. To sanctify the name of God is a tremendous mitzvah. It is a mitzvah that has tremendous merit. And when we do that in the merit of a person that passed away, it has tremendous merit for that person. So let's now go to why do we say Kaddish for a person that passed away. Now that you know the history, why do we say Kaddish for a person that passed away? So let's back up a little bit more. Person passed away. What happens to his soul? His soul goes up to heaven. Now, heaven is a very, very big word. What does heaven mean? Heaven is a spiritual reality disconnected from this reality. That's all. Heaven has what we call hell, purgatory, or in Hebrew, Gehenna. And then there's paradise, or what we call Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Every single neshama is eventually going to go into Gan Eden. There is no concept in Judaism of eternal damnation. It does not exist in Judaism. The concept of an eternal barbecue, where your soul will be roasted forever and ever and ever, does not exist in Judaism. It doesn't exist. There is a concept of hell, but hell is a cleansing process. Let me first explain one thing. There's a very famous Mishnah that says, Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelik le'olam haba, that every single Jew has a portion of Olam Haba, the world to come. Every single neshama is going to inherit Gan Eden, is going to go up there. Now, I already discussed this a little bit in the do-it-yourself Yisker class that we had about a week ago. I already touched upon this idea. And I'm going to repeat a little bit, not getting into it because it's very important to appreciate the purpose of Kaddish. Every single soul comes up to heaven with whatever it achieved during its lifetime. So heaven is, you come to heaven, and heaven is not monolithic. Heaven is not the same for every single person. Every single soul comes to heaven and experiences heaven on its level based upon the good and the bad that it did during its lifetime. So based on your spiritual experiences, based on the level of Torah you studied, based on the level of mitzvot and charity and good deeds you did, that is the kind of heaven that you are going to receive. Once you get to heaven, you cannot change what you brought with you. So however many mitzvot you did in this lifetime, however much charity you gave in this lifetime, that is what you get in heaven. Your spiritual reward, and I don't want to get into what reward and punishment is in a Jewish context. Maybe it'll be another very interesting lecture. Maybe that'll be a very interesting topic. Understand the idea of Jewish reward and punishment and hell and heaven, because I'm only touching on it now. But the point is that the soul is stuck. Whatever the soul has is like an autopilot. From here, the soul is an autopilot. And yes, the soul has some levels of elevation, but they're all very much based upon and relative to the level that it was on yesterday. So it climbs in a very systematic, controlled level of growth, like an autopilot. It's pre-programmed. This is your spiritual level when you enter heaven, and this is till where you will go. Now, every soul will enter heaven one day. Even George Soros, even Bernie Sanders. I'm getting a commentary. I'm saying that because there's a comment on Facebook about doesn't make a difference to every single soul will eventually. Yes, there could be some exceptions in history. I have a story of Elazar ben Dudayo who is called Achad. There's some, but generally speaking, the Mishnah says, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelik u'hava. Every single Jew has a portion of the world to come. The biggest sinner will go into Olam Haba. However, in order to get, they need to go through a cleansing process first. They need to be cleansed. They need to be purified that they can go into heaven. Much like I wear a nice white clean shirt, and if my shirt was to get a little bit of dirt on it, it would have to be washed in order to be able to be clean. I can wear it again. The more dirty the shirt got, the more cleansing it would require, the more it has to be scrubbed, or maybe sprayed with whatever spray my wife uses, shout, etc., to get the stains off the shirt. Maybe have to be washed the second time, etc. Now, obviously, if shirts could speak, a shirt would probably tell you that it's very painful to be sprayed with shout and to be put into a washing machine with hot water, and to go in the dryer and get dizzy and claustrophobic. But in order for the shirt to be cleansed, that's the process. So too it is that every single soul has to be cleansed and purified in order to go into the world to come. But once it's cleansed, it goes to that world. Now, and maybe we're going to talk about, maybe another night, we'll talk about reward and punishment in Judaism. I think it'd be a very interesting topic. And free will could get mixed into that. I'm just watching the time. I don't want to get too more distracted with this one. The point is, the soul is go through a cleansing, go through what we call a Gehenna, and then they can enter heaven. Now, in heaven, it can only ascend based upon the good deeds that it did in this world. However, here's a caveat. However, the lifetime of the soul does not end with the day that it died. The lifetime of the soul continues through the actions of those people that are living on the life of the soul in this world. So if the child of a person, or if the brother of a person, or if a friend, or a relative, or even someone else, or even a rabbi who was paid on behalf of this person, is saying Kaddish, and by saying Kaddish, they're sanctifying the name of God, and they're causing others to sanctify the name of God, then this soul's account, let's look at a bank account, came up with a bank account, right? You come up with a certain amount of money. Once you reach heaven, your business is closed. You cannot earn another cent. You can only spend the money that you have. However, us saying Kaddish down here below, and thereby causing others to say Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mivarach. Yes, it is true. May the great name of God be glorified and exalted and praised and lauded and magnified. By us saying those words, we are making a Kiddush Shem Shemayim. We are sanctifying the name of heaven down here in this world. And by us sanctifying the name of heaven in this world, because of the memory of Chaim, or the merit of Gershon Eliezer ben Shlomo, or the merit of Daniel ben Menachem Yitzchak, or the merit of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, or the merit of Yitzchak Isaac ben Tzvi, when we say these prayers in the merit of these people, guess what's happening? We are giving them more money in their bank account, because this child who is saying Kaddish in the merit of his father and causing people in the synagogue to answer that God's name is being glorified, it's as if that person is bringing merit. Hence, I hope it is obviously understood now why Kaddish must be said in a public setting. If the whole value of Kaddish is in the fact that it gives more value to the person, to the soul in heaven, because of what it is accomplishing in this world, through the verbiage, through the prayer of the child or the relative or the friend of this person that's in heaven, then the sanctification of God's name below causes additional merit, additional spiritual reward for the soul in heaven. But if you're home alone and you're sitting and you're saying Kaddish, you say, may God's name be great, but you're alone in your living room, and there's no one to hear you, and there's no one to answer you, and there's no one by whom you're saying this will cause the sanctification of God's name in public, then you're not causing a sanctification of God's name. So you're not causing a new level of merit to go up to this person in heaven. So you can absolutely pray at home. And you can absolutely spiritually, you can light a candle, and you can spiritually connect to the soul of your father, your mother, your child, your brother, etc. Absolutely. But that's not a sanctification of God's name. That's not causing the soul additional merit in heaven. Understand? It's a very important point. It's not about rabbinic control. It's not about giving people a reason to go to Minyan to make sure we have a Minyan in the synagogue. The entire objective of the Kaddish is the sanctification of God's name. And if there's no one that's sanctifying God's name as a result of the Kaddish prayer, it hasn't caused any merit to the soul in heaven. Hence, the Kaddish, it's not a sin. So now you're not using God's name in vain, but you haven't achieved the objective of saying the Kaddish. Now, someone's asking a very good question, and I'm a little hesitant to give the answer. Question is, what about shuls that are doing Kaddish via Zoom? Does that count? Because others are responding to your prayer, and therefore the name of heaven is being sanctified. It's a good question. It's a good question. And to some extent, based on what I said, you would think that yes, you're causing the name of heaven to be sanctified, regardless of how you're doing it. The problem is with Zoom in general, even though we're using Zoom as a very powerful tool for Torah, if people praying together via Zoom creates a revelation of the Shekhinah? And the answer is it doesn't. In order to have a minyan where the Shekhinah is revealed and relevant and prevalent there, which is another conversation, also not for tonight's class. Someone wants me to talk about why a minyan is 10 men and how the minyan causes the Shekhinah to be revealed in that place. Go to lifelongjewishlearning.com/podcast. And there you will have the opportunity to put in a question. If I get the question sent in, B'ezrat Hashem, one night we will talk about it. But let's suffice for tonight an answer to the question is that you're not creating an extension of an expression or revelation of Shekhinah via a Zoom in. You are creating a divine awareness. You are creating people connecting in prayer and all that. And so there is value to the name of heaven being sanctified through Zoom. The danger is that once you say, okay, so let's say Kaddish over Zoom, so then okay, so let's just have a minyan over Zoom, and the line in between the Kaddish and saying Kiddusha or saying Baruch Hu, the other parts of the prayer, the Torah reading, that wouldn't be allowed to be done via a Zoom minyan become very, very gray and blurry, and probably a very dangerous slope. Because you should know that all destructions of Judaism happen when you go down a slope. Meaning, you start with one little step. But once you're on the slide, it's very hard to stop the descent. So, my answer to the question, Marshall, will be about a Zoom minyan, is since the Zoom minyan doesn't reveal the Shekhinah, even if it does cause some of the benefit of Kaddish we just explained, we wouldn't use it as a minyan. Okay. Now, I had more that I wanted to say tonight. Okay, there is another part to the morning's Kaddish to the Kaddish called the burial Kaddish, but it actually established to say at cemeteries we only do it on certain days, which is a prayer about Chiyas HaMeis. In the Chabad custom, again, I really should have prepared to have this on the screen so you can see it. But in the Chabad Kaddish, we actually add in the words V'yatzmach Borkane V'karev Mishicha. So if you go to many Ashkenazi shuls, you'll hear that when they say Kaddish, they say, I'll put it up for you right away for those who can read in the Hebrew. I'll show you for a second. Let's go share my screen. And you can see right over here, and right over here, at this point, in the Chabad custom, we say V'yatzmach Borkani L'karev Mashiach, which is a blessing asking for Mashiach to come, the resurrection of the dead, which was said by cemeteries when they would do this prayer at the cemetery, where they, even in the Ashkenazi community, where they say this prayer asking for the resurrection of the dead. And then the next line, B'chayechon of Yomechon, that in our days and in the days of all of Israel, God's name should be sanctified, etc. Let's see these words in English, which is beautiful words. So we actually took that part from the cemetery, the request from Mashiach, and that is in the Chabad Siddur, not in the Ashkenaz. There's beautiful words here that are actually very relevant, though, for a mourner. When you are experiencing death, and you're in a state of mourning for someone that passed away, and then you're talking about B'chayechon, about the kingdom of God, and your lifetime, and during your days, B'chayechon, which means in your life, Uv Yomechon, during your days, Uv V'chayechon Beis Yisrael, in the life of all of the house of Israel. May God's name be glorified and exalted and extolled and honored, etc., etc. There's a tremendous value to the idea that right now we are creating a mindset in the person's mind where the person is going from a focus on death, a focus on loss, a focus on tragedy, and instead of being forced to focus on positivity, on blessing, on life, etc. And that's a very, very important point, which is also very much a reason why Kaddish has to be said with a minyan. Because besides for the most important reason, which is the spiritual objective of Kaddish, to sanctify the name of God, and thereby give additional merit to the soul in heaven, In addition to that, the whole idea of Kaddish is to help give a mourner the ability to heal in a positive, healthy way. Judaism is not a strictly important point. Judaism is not a purely spiritual religion. Judaism is a religion. Judaism is a way of life designed by the creator of life. And the creator of life, God, who knew human nature better than any of us know human nature, told us that the most healthy, best way for you to heal from the loss and the pain and the suffering of your personal tragedy and your personal grief is by going to shul and by standing together with other mourners in solidarity and being part of a group of people that came together to help you say Kaddish, who are supporting you and answering you, and to talk about life and say B'chayechon Uvyomechon U'chayedechon Beit Yisrael, which means that in your lifetime and in your days and in the lifetime of all of Israel, let us say Amen. So there's a very beautiful, powerful, healing, and catharsis, allowing of grief to come in a healthy way, where we gather together and we stand as a community, we stand as a family, and we share that grief. So again, the Kaddish is not a prayer of personal mourning. There's absolutely no grief and no sorrow and no mention of the word death anywhere in the entire Kaddish. Doesn't exist. The Kaddish is not a prayer of sadness. The Kaddish is a prayer of first of all, praising God's name, first and foremost. But secondly, the Kaddish is a prayer where we're meant to come together as a community to support each other, to get spirit, etc. And therefore, when we do that, that is the best way to heal when we come together. And therefore, because that's the best way to heal, therefore, let's see if I can find this. Because it's the best way to heal, that is why, I don't have it. Because it's the best way to heal, that is why it has to be done only in the Minyan. Again, if you want to pray for the merit of someone that passed away, you are more than welcome to go into your home and say all the prayers and daven, put on tefillin, giving charity, something you don't need a Minyan for, and charity is perhaps even more powerful than saying Kaddish, etc. But the idea of Kaddish requires the unity of everyone coming together, saying, in our lifetimes where we see the kingdom of God revealed in this world, and everyone responding, Amen. Let's see the name of God be glorified. Now I want to share with you a very inspiring thought, and then the beautiful story. First, for the thoughts. This was shared through by somebody. It's a very interesting perspective. I think that it's true. I actually called another rabbi today and asked him his opinion. He said, yeah, you think it makes sense to him? Sounds right. I'm not sure where this originated from, but someone said about the fact that today we can't say Kaddish. For those that are watching that are not able to say Kaddish today. So besides the comfort that our class caused the sanctification of God's name in the merit of all those that unfortunately don't have Kaddish said for them, I want to share with you an amazing thought that someone shared with me and that I think is true. I made sure to explain earlier tonight about the fact that everyone eventually goes to heaven, but many people start off in Gehenna, in purgatory, where they go through a cleansing process in order to allow them to eventually enter the reward and the spiritual bliss of Gan Eden of paradise. And again, I'm not explaining what that bliss is, although maybe for another day. Originally, when they instituted the Sey Kaddish for a mourner, not just in the home of the Shiva, but afterwards, it was decided to say, first was for the 30 days of mourning, because it was a mourner's Kaddish. And then it was decided that children should say Kaddish for the full year for their parents as a sign of respect to take care of the needs of their parents. Why take care of the needs of their parents? Because if their parent is still in the cleansing process of Gehenna, good evening, I mean, if they're still in the cleansing process of Gehenna, of purgatory, the Kaddish of the child, or the Kaddish of the person that was hired on behalf as the agent of the child of this person to say Kaddish, that prayer eases the pain and the suffering of the soul in its suffering, in cleansing. It's adding, as we already explained, more spiritual value to your retirement package in heaven, to your 401k, your spiritual 401k, to allow the soul to end its suffering earlier, to be able to leave Gehenna earlier, to go to heaven. So originally, this idea of saying Kaddish by the child, so a parent only says it for 30 days for his child, a brother, a sibling only says it for 30 days for their sibling, because that's the time of the shloshim, the time of the mourning. But as a sign of respect and as of taking care of your parent, which you have an obligation to take care of your parent, we do it for the full, originally you decided to do it for the full year. And then that custom got changed. And then instead of saying Kaddish for the full year of mourning, we should only say it for 11 months of mourning. Why only for 11 months, not for the full year? Because we don't want to say that our parent is still in Gehenna, still in its cleansing process for a full year. That would mean that basically we're saying that we think that our parent, or the person we're saying Kaddish for, was such a sinner that took them the entire extent of time for a soul to be cleansed. And I believe that I mentioned earlier, the standard, the longest amount of time, and there's rare exceptions, but the longest amount of time that it's written in the holy books that a person's soul is in Gehenna is 12 months. After 12 months, every soul, generally speaking, every single soul goes into heaven at whatever level of heaven it has. But every single soul, even the biggest sinners of Israel, goes to heaven. But to say Kaddish for the full year means that you think your parents are sitting in hell for a full year. And therefore we say for only 11 months to show our certainty that this soul that we're saying Kaddish for has already finished its purification process and already went to heaven. We know there's a rule in Talmud, which means that God does not give a burden to people that's more than they can handle. God does not create a situation that's not sustainable. If God creates a situation, it means that God knows that this is doable. It's realistic. Which means in this context of a person not being able to say Kaddish, if the fact that God created a situation in which every single synagogue is closed, and therefore it's impossible to find a minyan to say Kaddish, that means that God is assuring us that that person's soul does not need to have Kaddish said for it. Why not? Because that person's soul has no cleansing process, able to go straight to heaven. When I did a funeral today, I shared the start of the funeral we did today. I think that it's true. I think that it's true. Just like a soul that's buried on Friday afternoon, there's no Gehenna is closed on Shabbos, goes straight to Gan Eden. A soul that is now in this time when there's no Kaddish being said is going straight to a level of purification where they don't need the assistance of us mortals on this world saying Kaddish, because it's already, there's a spiritual energy helping these souls. These souls are on a higher level. I'm not sure how to, what's happening in heaven, but the soul is already on a spiritual level where it does not need our Kaddish to be said. And so therefore I'm offering words of comfort that I've thought about these words. I'm not just saying them because they sound good. I really, does it feel right? I didn't see this in a reliable source, but I'm saying this, I believe this is a true thought. That if you are sitting right now and a yard site passed for your parents and you weren't able to say Kaddish, if a person is sitting Shiva, and I know there's someone sitting Shiva right now watching this, who's sitting Shiva for a child and they can't say Kaddish, you should know that your soul, your child's soul, this soul is in a place in heaven where it does not need our Kaddish to be said. Because if it needed our Kaddish, then God would have allowed us or enabled us to have the opportunity to say Kaddish for this person. If God didn't give us that opportunity, it means that the soul doesn't need it. The soul is automatically on a higher spiritual level. Okay. And now I'm going to end off with a beautiful story. This is what we call an amazing story. It is a true story. It is a story that has been verified with the names. I'm going to share with you the details of the story right now. So I have the name right in front of me. There's a great rabbi in the city of Pressburg. Pressburg was one of the most important cities in the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the 1800s. There's a huge Jewish community there, and there was a big yeshiva there. Some great rabbis were there. In the mid 1800s, there was a man who was a very wealthy and very, very generous, very charitable. He had a custom that every single day he would go and bring the meiser, the tithe of that day's earnings to the yeshiva. You know, every single person should be giving 10% of their earnings to charity. And I can promise you that if you do, you'll see a lot of blessings. I'm saying this from personal experience. It works. But we don't do it on a daily basis. This person, every day he made a calculation. What did he make that day? Every morning, he would go bring the previous day's earnings, the 10% of that earnings to the yeshiva. Tragically, this man got ill and he passed away very young. He left behind a widow and young children. Young daughters, 5 young daughters, no sons. The wife, very wise young woman, she took over her husband's business and she began to run it. And not only did she run her husband's business, but she obviously went to the yeshiva. The yeshiva was the yeshiva of the Ksav Sefer. Was a great rabbi, and she asked that she continue giving the mice every day, that yeshiva students should say prayers, say the Kaddish, and study the Torah on behalf of her husband's soul. She kept doing this, and even after the Kaddish was done, the year was done, the 11 months were done, she decided to continue every single day going to the yeshiva with the mice or with the tithe to pay that whoever in the world passed away. I think when I passed away, there's no one saying Kaddish. She wanted to pay that there should be yeshiva students saying Kaddish on behalf of this person that had passed away. 10 years this goes by. 10 years this goes by. Her young daughters are now of marriageable age. And sadly, the wheel of fortune turned. And this woman that had been married to a very wealthy man, had been running a very successful business. The business began to go south, and her situation slowly got worse and worse. And nobody knew it. She was running a business. People didn't know her financial situation. Besides for the Rosh Hashiva, the Chassam Sofer, who knew she was bringing less and less charity, and she opened up her heart to him and told her sorrows, until it got to the point where she was not able to keep the business afloat, and she couldn't keep it afloat. And she felt very, very bad that now she's going to have to stop giving her donations to the yeshiva. And she decided she's going to sell her jewelry and to still give some money every day to the yeshiva to ensure that they keep on saying Kaddish for anyone that passed away that has nobody to say Kaddish for this person. And so she told the Rosh Hashiva that she sold some of her jewelry, and she kept every single day giving a little bit of money to the yeshiva to make sure that every day there was someone saying Kaddish. She had to pay every day. Today we do Kaddish, 360 for the year, to pay for the day that they should say Kaddish. One day, a matchmaker, a shadchan, matchmaker comes to her house. So, your daughters are getting marriageable age, you're a wealthy woman, and I have some names that I want to suggest to you. Maybe it's time to talk about a shidduch for your daughter. Now, in the olden days, the 1800s, to marry off your daughter, you needed to have money for a dowry, money for a wedding, money for furniture for them, and a dowry to get the money to get them established. She had not a penny for a dowry. She was barely putting food on her table. Her business was doing terrible. So she says to the matchmaker, she doesn't want to tell people that she's poor. She said, let me think about it. Let me get back to you. She runs out of the house in tears. The seriousness and the sadness of her situation, that she wasn't able to a penny for her daughters to get married, was the first time that she truly felt the pain of her poor situation. She goes straight to the yeshiva, straight into the office, and she comes to the office of the Chassam Sofer, and she begins to pour out her soul. And she says to him, what should I do? I have no money. My daughters need to get married. What should I do? Chassam Sofer blesses her, and he says, let me see what I can do for you. And nothing. She leaves the yeshiva. She goes outside on the step, and she begins to cry. Sitting right there outside the yeshiva. She's a broken woman. All of a sudden, a very wealthy-looking man comes over to her and says, "What's the matter?" She wasn't a random stranger. She says, "Please tell me what's the matter." So in her tears, she tells the man, "I have daughters. I need to marry them off. I don't know what to do." She says, "I'm going to help you. You look like a wonderful woman. I will give you a check, a cashier's check, that you can go and deposit whatever you need to borrow, how much you need." She said, "She'll get 5 daughters. Each daughter," he says, "let me make a calculation. You need 5,000, 10,000 kroner for your dowry, for money for each one. Here is another 1,000 kroner for your wedding expenses. I'm going to give you $5,000 for each one of your children." The 25,000 kroner was the currency in Austria at that time. He says, "I don't want anyone to doubt my check. Just come inside the yeshiva. Let me sign the check in front of 2 witnesses." They go back into the yeshiva. He calls Chassam Sofer, says, "I wanted to get 2 of your top students to be my witnesses that I am lending the woman this money, giving her a cashier's check that she can go to my bank where I bank down the road, and she can deposit this check and get the money." So he calls 2 of his students. We know the names of the story. His son, Rabbi Shimon Sofer, and his other top student, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, who will later become the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, and he himself told this story. Listen to the story. He brings them to the office, and this very wealthy, prestigious-looking older man says to them that this woman told me she has 5 daughters. I trust her. I want to lend her 25,000 kroner for each one of her daughters, total for her daughters. And I'm writing on a check. I want you both to sign as witnesses on the check that I'm giving her the money. And he took out a checkbook out of his pocket. He writes a check for her. He said, "I want you to go to this and this bank. This is my personal banker." It says the name of a person. You go ask for him. You give him. He'll see the signature on the check. And in case he challenges the signature, here's the contract. The state of the affidavit, I guess what we call it, of these 2 yeshiva students who recognize my signature, they see that I'm signing it, etc., etc. I'm going to open the bank, tell 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, go and get it. With that, the guy walked in. Chassam Sofer said, "Who is this guy? It looks like a very wealthy guy, getting 25,000 kroner." Imagine a guy walks into your office, a donor, potential donor, drops 25,000 bucks and walks out. You don't know you don't have his email address, his cell number. So go over and have to go find him. Next morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, the widow is standing by the bank, and she goes to the banker, to the teller, says, "Here's a check, 25,000 kroner. It's such a large check. It's not just going to be deposited just like that." So they go to the manager to check. The manager comes, he sees the check, and he sees the check. The manager of the bank faints. Pandemonium breaks loose. They all go crazy. He wakes up. The man says, "Who is this? The one I want to see." They bring him to the back office. He says, "Tell me, who gave you this check?" So she said the whole story, and I was like crying. This old man came and he gave me the check and all that. I have the document of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rabbi Shimon Sofer, who are 2 rabbis in the yeshiva that signed up on the contract. So if I show you, describe the man, she describes the man. This banker is shaking. He takes out a picture and he says, "Tell me, is this the person that gave you the check?" She saw a picture and she said, "Yeah, that's exactly the person." And he said, "I need to see the witnesses. I don't believe you." So they go to the yeshiva, the woman and the bank manager, they go to the yeshiva. And they call out Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. They call out Shimon Sofer. They tell us this is the person. They say they describe exactly what happened. They say, "We were here at yeshiva. This man walked in with the woman. He wrote down the check. He said that in case his signature would be challenged, he wanted us to sign it. He gave the signature. And he goes and puts out a photo. And they say, "This is the man." He says to them, "This man is my father. This man that gave the check is my father. He passed away a year ago. Passed away. Passed away. I have been a terrible Jew. I have not been to Shalom many years. I even married out of the faith, and I even married to a Jew. And I have not done anything married to my father, not Kaddish, not anything. And now is already the year of his passing. And actually this morning I saw a reminder, I remember that's my father's yard site. And then I see this check. I see that my father is sending the money to you. That's going to come out of my account. If I can afford it, I'm going to give it to you. What merit did you have? How did you help my father that he should come to you from the other world? Come back from the other world to give you this money. And she's thinking and she realizes that she has been paying from her own money, her own jewelry that she pawned off to ensure that there would be yeshiva students that were saying Kaddish for anyone in the city that had no one saying Kaddish for that person. And the son of this very, very wealthy banker who had not said Kaddish for his father the whole year, instead, the merit, the elevation of the soul of that person came from the rabbis of the yeshiva that were being paid by this woman. And therefore, in honor of this woman's paying them to say Kaddish, this person gave her the money that she should be able to marry off her daughters. This is a true story. Shir Rabbi Yisrael Chaim, son of the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, many years later, he witnessed it first. My friends, the power of saying Kaddish, tremendous, tremendous. Anyway, I bless you all. May we never need to say Kaddish. May we never, ever need to say mourner's Kaddish. The Kaddish der Rabbanan, yes. The Kaddish of the rabbis, the Kaddish of the scholars, of blessing of Jewish people. We should all become scholars. We should all say that Kaddish. And may the mourner's Kaddish be forgotten, because there'll be no more mourners left in all of Israel. The coming of Mashiach, God willing, very, very soon. Please go online and I'll show you something. You go to lifelongjewishlearning.com/podcasts. You can find a way to share with us what topics it is that you would like to have discussed in tomorrow night's class. And it's very simple. lifelongjewishlearning.com/podcasts. Thank you, Laila Tov. Thank you very, very much.